Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to this webinar, Sustainable Cooling for All in Asia. This is the first one of Chilean Prospects 2022 webinar series. Two more webinars will follow tomorrow, focusing on Asia and on Africa and on Latin America and the Caribbean. But thank you very much for joining today. My name is Giorgia Pascoletto. I'm an energy efficiency and cooling specialist here at Sustainable Energy for All, or SE for All, and I will be your host for the first part of this webinar. Thank you for joining this very important conversation. I think it could not be more timely, and it gets timelier every week because we see it in the headlines. Our planet is warming, heat waves are affecting various regions of the world. And so a conversation on sustainable cooling and access to sustainable cooling is really becoming vital to protect both people and our planet. So before we start, please note that this webinar will be recorded. We will be sharing some slides and the recording together with the slides will be uploaded on our website. So you can all find it there. Also, please feel free to share your questions and thoughts in the chat. We will try and address them along the way and maybe until in the final Q&A. And if not, we can also follow up afterwards with any questions you might have. So in the next hour, we will really dive into sustainable cooling in Asia. So where do we stand? Where do countries in the region stand when it comes to access to sustainable cooling for all? And what are some urgent actions that are needed in order to transition to efficient and sustainable cooling for all quickly in the region? We will hear youth perspectives on how youth are taking action already to accelerate cooling innovations. We will share some data and trends from the latest Chilean Prospects 2022 report. And finally, we will dive deeper and hear from experts who are really making a difference in the region on sustainable cooling and access to sustainable cooling. And in the end, we hope to have enough time to address as many of your questions as possible. But before we start, we have a special message from our first guest. She's Damilola Ogunbiyi. She's the SE for All CEO and Special Representative of the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. A conversation on sustainable cooling for all could not be more important and urgent. As we see in the headlines every day, countries around the world are grappling with the dire effects of heat waves and record high temperatures. The science is clear. Due to climate change, the number of people exposed to extreme heat events is increasing. And people from low-income groups, those without access to adequate electricity, living in hot rural areas and in fast-growing cities are particularly vulnerable. In a warming world, cooling is essential for food security, vaccines, and protecting people in heat waves. Yet, SE for All's latest Chilean Prospect report shows that in 2022, 1.2 billion people, nearly 1 in 7 people globally, are at risk because of the lack of essential cooling. Unless we significantly step up action on universal electrification and ending energy poverty, this number is set to rise by 2030. Having access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and efficient energy is now critical for adaptation to climate change, to power cooling devices that are essential for literally keeping people alive. We must also shift access to efficient and sustainable cooling technologies to be able to extend access to cooling to those with limited power and to limit the increase in energy consumption, and emissions. As many as 2.47 billion people in lower middle income groups are at the brink of purchasing cooling devices and having few options that are affordable or sustainable. The good news is that solutions to these challenges exist, from equipping healthcare centers in rural areas with solar vaccine fridges, to using nature and passive solutions in cities, to boosting efficiency of air conditioners and cold chain equipment. But urgent policy action and investment are necessary to deliver these solutions at scale. We also need more innovation, and we need youth to be at the forefront of a just and equitable energy transition. That's why we launched a challenge for a youth-led sustainable cooling solution, which you will hear more about today. This is a crucial decade. As the planet warms, how cooling needs are met, how fast and with which solutions will be decisive for delivering clean energy transitions that are just and equitable. Sustainable Energy for All looks forward to continuing to work with you all to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 7 and ensure access to sustainable cooling for all. Thank you for listening.
Many thanks to Damilola for setting the scene for us today and for setting it so well, really stressing the urgency of action in both policy and investments to accelerate access to cooling, and really highlighting the importance of access to cooling in a just and equitable transition. On a warming planet, cooling is not an issue, not a luxury, it's an issue of equity. And we heard from her that more innovation is needed and that youth all over the world are already accelerating innovations to deliver cooling for all. So a Sustainable Energy for All, in partnership with the Cool Coalition, launched earlier in May. This is Cool Challenge, call for proposals, calling for youth-led solutions all over the world that can help deliver cooling for all. So if you're a young innovator out there, make sure to apply for this challenge by the 30th of August. You can do it through our website. So winners, the top 3 teams will win cash prizes up to $10,000 US. They will get spotlight features from SE4All and our partners and exhibition opportunities. So this is really a great opportunity. And if you are working on a solution that could be policy or technology solution, please make sure to apply. We look forward to seeing many applications coming in. And speaking of young innovators, it is really my pleasure to welcome Ishita Yadav, our first speaker. So Ishita is a passionate youth advocate for sustainable energy and climate equity. She serves at South Asia's regional focal point at the SDG 7 Youth Constituency, and she coordinates the Youth Sustainable Energy Hub, a platform that showcases the work of young practitioners in the sustainable energy sectors. Ishita has been involved in the climate advocacy sphere for several years, and she works to empower youth to take meaningful actions and create momentum for change. So welcome, Ishita. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining today. It's really exciting to hear from you. So Ishita, from your experience, in your view, what is the role of youth-led innovation to accelerate sustainable cooling for all, globally as well as in Asia? And what actions can government and partners take now to support it at its fullest potential?
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Georgia, for the introduction. Youth involvement and leadership in sustainable energy efforts are vital to achieving a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient energy transition. Over the next decade, young people will directly influence the outcome of SDG 7 as a key driver for successful implementation. Youth empowerment facilitates a paradigm for change, fostering creativity, advancing sustainable leadership, and promoting equality. At the forefront of innovation, young people are pioneering new technologies and leading startups in sectors from transportation and clean energy to waste management and cooling. But currently, cooling contributes to 8.5% of total electricity consumption. And as global temperatures rise, this number is only expected to increase. Young people understand the need for cooling solutions that doesn't warm our planet and demand radical action to employ sustainable and affordable cooling solutions. Notable solutions that young people have been engaged in, both in South Asia and globally at the SDG 7 Youth Constituency, is increasing minimum energy performance standards on air conditioning and commercial refrigeration products, as well as integrating technologies such as trigeneration, industrial grade electric chillers, and waste heat recovery techniques into cooling networks and frameworks to really bridge the gap that in cooling, since there's like such a big need for cooling at this point, but the supply is just so low. And while some nations have begun implementing strict regulations for cooling products and processes, Asia is yet to administer such energy efficiency frameworks. And under such circumstances, young people all over Asia are calling on governments to actively integrate sustainable cooling into national and sub-national energy plans. The Youth Sustainable Energy Hub is the first global platform showcasing the work of youth practitioners to advance SDG 7 goals. The vision of YSCH is to empower youth to be the driving force behind the achievement of clean and affordable energy for all. The platform aims to facilitate action and capacity building by providing select projects with access to visibility, knowledge, mentoring, and other opportunities. The platform is a milestone for galvanizing youth engagement in the sustainable energy sphere as we rapidly approach the halfway mark in the decade for sustainable energy and enter the decade for action. Last year, we selected 98 projects from a pool of 250 applications, and this year we just onboarded an additional 50 applications from a pool of 150. Sustainable cooling is an area of particular interest at the Youth Sustainable Energy Hub. Young people have been particularly receptive to the demand-supply market gap for cooling solutions. From facilitating solar refrigeration programs to mainstreaming cooling materials and ventilation solutions in commercial constructions, young people have been supporting cooling in numerous ways. However, young people face numerous barriers in terms of accessing quality education and training, acquiring finance, and securing meaningful employment opportunities in the energy sphere, preventing them from leading, participating, and benefiting from the sustainable energy transition. Moreover, young people are often overlooked and excluded from policy and decision-making processes, despite active involvement in their communities and a strong commitment to advancing Agenda 2030. Under such circumstances, resources and opportunities such as affordable training and learning programs, paid internships, youth entry-level mobility schemes, and such solutions can build relevant technical skills among the youth demographic. Similarly, action is needed to financially empower youth action in SDG 7 by developing enabling policies to bridge the gap between private climate finance and youth-led initiatives. Such efforts must also be reinforced by the formation of partnerships on all levels among organizations and youth-led and/or youth-owned businesses. Young people have so much to gain and so much to lose from this energy transition, and they need to be actively engaged in order for us to have a sustainable and resilient green recovery. And I think by adequately empowering them, they can contribute in so many ways and really ensure that we have like a holistic and inclusive energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishita. On one hand, it's great to hear that the cohort of the Youth Sustainable Energy Hub is already working on sustainable cooling solutions. It's great to hear that youth recognizes this as an important issue to accelerate innovation on. but thank you for your call to action, both on, we need more ambitious, more stringent policies for efficient cooling and sustainable cooling, but also to really support youth so they can drive this transition. And in the broader energy transition sphere, but also in a transition to sustainable, efficient cooling for all. We hope to hear more from you later. So everyone, please, you're really encouraged to share any questions for Ishita, and she might join again during the Q&A session and sort of share her reflections also on the next segments. But in this next segment, we would like to sort of set the scene for the discussion that will follow by sharing some of the key data and findings of the Chile Prospect report. So Chile Prospect Tracking Sustainable Cooling for All 2022 was launched in May at the Sustainable Energy for All Forum in Kigali, Rwanda, and it was launched in partnership with the Cool Coalition. This is the fifth installment of the report. And we would like to thank the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation for supporting this work through these years. So within the next 10 minutes, we would like to share with you some of the key findings from this report on sustainable cooling access gaps and what are the risks that come from that. Looking at some trends, especially within Asia, on different cooling needs that involved human comfort, but also agriculture, food, supply, and health. Talk about a little bit about sustainable cooling for cities, as well as the enabling environment. So the policies that Ishita was talking about that are needed to really accelerate progress in this sphere. So let's start from some tracking data. What we found is that in 2022, 1.2 billion people were at high risk because they lack access to cooling. This is an increase of 28 million people compared to last year. And it's due to a number of factors, which include urbanization trends that continue to add pressure onto urban environments, but also the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic that for the second year in a row reversed some of the progress that was done before in terms of reducing poverty. So this high-risk group includes populations that live in rural areas or urban areas, and they have no access to electricity and live with incomes below the extreme poverty line, or that live in urban slums, for example. So what does this mean? This means that they might lack access to good ventilation and refrigeration in their homes, but also that farmers in these settings may lack access to cold chains that allow them to deliver their products to markets. And also that vaccines and medical supplies could be exposed to high temperatures. So in 54 countries that we have identified as high impact, there are 371 million rural poor and almost 800 million urban poor at high risk in 2022. And then there are an additional 30 million people that are at high risk in other 22 countries that are not considered high impact overall, but that have pockets of risk at regional level due to local weather, socioeconomic, and infrastructure conditions. So this is one type of risk that it's growing and that needs urgent addressing. But at the same time, we also found that 2.47 billion people are at medium risk. And this is also an increase of over 100 million compared to last year. What is this population includes a growing lower middle income segment who is purchasing the most affordable cooling devices on the market, but who may have few options that are both efficient and climate friendly and also affordable. So poor efficiency means higher energy expenses as the cooling devices are operated over their lifetimes, but also a growing climate and energy risk. So diving a bit deeper into trends in Asia, in 2022, there are 16 high impact countries in Asia, and these countries are home to the largest share of each of these three groups. So as much as 48% of the rural poor and 64% of the urban poor populations are within Asia. And both these populations have grown in recent years, as you see in the charts here. Also, as much as 81% of the lower middle income population at medium risk is located in Asia. India and Bangladesh in particular appear in the top 10 of high impact countries for each of these risk groups by volume of the population at risk. But also China, Indonesia, and Pakistan are among the global top 10 for urban poor and lower middle income populations. Besides these 16 high impact countries, there are 11 countries that have these pockets of regional risk that I was mentioning before. And among these countries, most notably is Nepal, with an additional almost 17 million people that are either at high or medium risk. There's a lot of data that we really encourage you to explore in the Chilean Prospects report. So for the first time this year, Chilean Prospects also explore how this risk group might evolve until 2030 under different scenarios. And there's, again, a lot of data that you can find in the report, but there are 3 messages that I would like to share today. One is that achieving universal access and eradicating extreme poverty will be absolutely vital to reduce the population at high risk. Globally, meeting SDG 7.1 and 1.1 would lift almost 500 million people out of high risk compared to what would happen if we follow current trends. And this is true particularly for the rural poor population. However, and this is the second message that I would like to share, this alone won't be enough, particularly in cities. You see here that over 359 million urban poor might still be at high risk, even in this scenario, in Asia alone by 2030. So there really is a need to ensure affordable and efficient cooling solutions that can reach the urban populations that are most vulnerable. And this includes passive and nature-based solutions that can protect vulnerable urban dwellers from heat. And also to ensure where access to electricity is in place, I need to ensure efficient solutions that can operate even at low tiers of energy access. The third and last message that I would like to share is that under this scenario, the medium risk population in Asia would rise to almost 1.5 billion lower middle income people at medium risk, which really calls for the need to accelerate the markets for efficient and sustainable cooling solutions to mitigate the individual but also energy and climate risks that we introduced earlier. So if we look a bit more in detail into the first of the 3 energy and cooling needs that we have identified, human comfort and safety, we really, the data really show that the ability to cool down adequately during heat waves or during hot periods, it really means protecting health and protecting lives, as well as protecting livelihoods and productivity. Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan are already experiencing losses in potential work hours that are above the world average by 2.5 to 3 times the world average. And in this context, growing incomes and adaptation needs, as Ishita was also mentioning, are really driving a steep growth in demand for cooling appliances in Asia. And the same steep trend applies to the energy that these appliances will require, which is the one you see here in the chart. By 2030, it is estimated that more than 3.5 billion appliances could be in use in just 12 of the high impact countries in Asia. This includes air conditioning, fans, and refrigerators. So how energy efficient these appliances will be, it will have drastic effects on energy consumption and on emissions. So deploying best available technologies instead of following business as usual patterns could save an estimated 2,900 terawatt hours of cumulative energy use in the next 8 years. This is a really large potential for saving, which will have multiple benefits, from reducing the pressure on electricity systems to allowing energy capacity to serve more users, individual and productive uses. And also it will allow to avoid the growth in greenhouse gases emissions in order to keep, for example, net zero goals within reach. So in order to realize this full potential, countries really need to double down on energy efficiency policies, energy performance standards for both products and buildings, and also put in place mechanisms to address affordability barriers for lower income populations. Within cities specifically, passive and nature-based solutions can play an important role to reduce the demand for cooling from the outset. It is estimated that currently cities only invest less than 0.3% of their infrastructure budgets on nature-based solutions, despite the multiple benefits that these solutions can bring. So this year, SE4All analyzed risk trends in the most populated cities of 9 countries. And it did so combining GIS data on land use with climate projections and other data such as the change in cultivated areas, change in informal settlements. And what we found is that these 5 cities, Dhaka, Jakarta, Karachi, Mumbai, and Shanghai, in these 5 cities, built-up areas increased since 2015 at the expenses of various types of vegetation. And Shanghai and Karachi in particular saw the highest growth. If not managed properly, this growth risks exacerbating the urban heat island effect and exacerbating the adaptation challenges in these cities, especially for the most vulnerable populations. So data like this are available in the digital version of the report, and we really encourage you to explore it. And it can be very helpful to point city governments, urban planners, practitioners in the cities towards effective measures that can help them plan and build for the future. So plan and build to ensure the resilience of urban populations in growing heat waves. Going beyond human comfort and safety, reliable and sustainable cold chains are really crucial also for agriculture economies to grow and to grow sustainably, and for achieving SDG 2 on zero hunger. It is estimated that a lack of sustainable cold chains leads to a loss of approximately 13% of global food production every year. This is enough to feed over 950 million people. And it also contributes to a loss in the income of smallholder farmers of approximately 15%. Global food loss, we found that global food loss is concentrated mainly in Asia, followed by South America and Africa. And among high impact countries, China, India, and Pakistan have among the highest food losses, both in terms of volume, but also per capita. So reducing food loss with efficient cold chains can really reduce the vulnerabilities for least developed countries and countries with the lowest food supplies, and really accelerate progress towards SDG 2. But at the same time, food production also uses a significant amount of energy and is a source of greenhouse gas emissions. And Asia, especially China and India, currently dominates energy use for food production, with approximately 730 terawatt hours per year. This is the one you see here in the chart. It is estimated that sustainable energy technologies and sustainable cooling technologies in the agriculture sector could reduce cold chain emissions by 55%, as well as food losses by over 50%. So it is really important to accelerate these solutions and also complement the deployment of these solutions with business models and innovations, for example, for refrigeration in off-grid settings, so that small-scale producers can also access them and reap the benefit of efficient cold chain solutions. So we can also not, deliver SDG 3 on good health and well-being without reliable cold chains that can guarantee the supply of vaccines and of other medical products, and also cooling appliances that can ensure comfort cooling in health facilities. So most countries in South and Southeast Asia are among those that have been assessed by the WHO effective vaccine management assessments at least once in 2009, between 2009 and 2020. And these assessments found that there are still gaps in cold chains and refrigeration for vaccine delivery and storage. And these gaps increase especially as we move towards lower distribution levels in the supply chain towards service points. The assessment also found that many facilities lacked stable electricity supply and, for example, experience substantial voltage fluctuations. And this could damage medical equipment, including cooling appliances, and it really can threaten the efficacy of care. So moving towards, what can be done to address these gaps. I think one key takeaway is that cooling is really truly multidimensional issues. We saw that challenges exist at multiple levels, from the individual appliances to cities, the built environment, and national energy and national development goals. And this means that policy frameworks that want to accelerate sustainable cooling need to be comprehensive and address multiple sectors of the economy. So the national cooling action plans offer one approach for coordinated planning. And we will hear more about NCAPs during the panel discussion. And this year we found that already a few countries have published an NCAP, and several are in the process of developing one. And within a national cooling action plan, something that we wanted to stress is really that the need to include targets and strategies for various sectors that include space cooling, efficiency of space cooling, but also going beyond that and really look at agricultural and medical cold chain and include targets and strategies that are able to address that. And also consider a variety of solutions that are both active and passive and can target different populations at risk, including current access gaps. So moving close to the end, Chilean Prospect also introduced a policy tracking approach this year. We will continue collecting data to identify policy gaps and areas for improvement in policies to accelerate sustainable cooling for all across 3 different axes, which is policies for access to cooling, policies for energy efficient cooling, and also to reduce climate impacts of cooling. And we included here the example of Bangladesh, but you find a similar assessment for 9 critical countries in the report. And in our next segment, we will hear more about the policy progress that countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia have made recently, and what more can be done. The good news is that we heard it, many solutions already exist and many more are being piloted every year. And we collected stories from a large community of partners that are making the difference in different regions. And also I would like to point you to the This is Cool solution repository that can help you navigate different types of solutions that address human comfort, agriculture, and food. There's a lot of knowledge out there, and I'm really excited about hearing more in the next segment. So thank you for your attention so far, and really I invite you to post any questions in the chat so we can address them. And now I will hand it over to the panel discussion. I will hand it over to my colleague Alvin Joseph, who is a principal energy specialist here at SC4All. He has over 14 years of experience in sustainable energy, energy efficiency, and environment. And today he will be joined by 3 brilliant experts. We see already on screen Mehul Jain. He is a climate change specialist at the World Bank. And he has worked at the World Bank for the past 6 years on issue of policy, technology, governance, environment, and development. And he led the World Bank's report on the operationalization of India's cooling action plan. They will be joined also by Kim Roseberry. She's a sustainable energy professional with the UN ESCAP. And she has been involved in efforts supporting progress towards SDG 7 for many years. And she currently manages UN ESCAP's portfolio of sustainable cooling projects. And they are joined by Herlin Herlianica, a refrigeration and air conditioning experts with over 25 years of experience in the cooling sector and operating currently in Indonesia. She's also a member of the Refrigeration Technical Committee and in the National Standard Agency under the Ministry of Industry in Indonesia. Yeah, so I hand it over to you, Alvin, for the panel discussion, and we'll be looking forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Georgia. A very good morning to everyone from Vienna and for everybody who is joining in. I'm really happy to be joined by some very esteemed colleagues from very important organizations that are actually promoting the sustainable cooling work in Asia. And I really hope that some of the discussions that we have today will be insightful and also will help to progress some of the discussions that we are trying to have in the region. So when we are speaking of region, I would like to first call on to Kim from ESCAP. And maybe I'll dive in straight away, Kim, is to first understand from an ESCAP's point of view, what are the, first of all, of course, we have seen in the past few years that ESCAP has taken a lot of leadership in promoting sustainable cooling in the region. So if you could just give a few minutes of brief to everyone on what ESCAP has been doing to support developing countries in the region on sustainable cooling.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alvin. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be part of this panel discussion. To help communicate what we're doing in the region, I've prepared a slide or two to give everyone an overview. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, wonderful. So once again, thank you so much. As was previously mentioned, national cooling action plans are an important part of solving the cooling challenge. And in the Asia Pacific region, UN Environment and ESCAP have teamed up under the Cool Coalition to support countries in developing these plans. Together, they developed a standardized, comprehensive methodology, and that was first piloted in Cambodia. This methodology is a 7-step and 3-phase process where the first stage is really focused on context, assessing that context and planning for the development of a national cooling action plan. So looking at a high-level mapping of the cooling landscape, what is the existing knowledge that exists in that country, and then looking at what are the priorities for that developing country and who are the key stakeholders and governance structures in place that really shape the cooling sector. The second stage is focused on cooling demand assessment. And this is a big effort in gathering data, which for some of these countries may be the first time they're really consolidating data for cooling the various subsectors into one place and really gathering it from the various actors in the cooling sector, public and private. So we look at that data, we do a data-driven assessment of what the current situation is for various sectors, and then look at what is the trend and what's the future outlook for cooling. And when I say subsectors, we are talking about not only space cooling, but as was previously mentioned, cold chain, for food, agriculture, fisheries, and medicine, vaccines, as well as mobile air conditioning, buildings. But in that first phase, we're going to identify what are the priorities for each country in their own context. And then we're looking at, once we have that data and we've gathered that data, what are the potential solutions and future pathways for each of those subsectors. The third phase is really synthesizing what we've learned in that second stage and identifying what the potential pathways forward are, and consolidating all of those sector-specific assessments into one place and developing the key recommendations for moving forward with a national cooling action plan. We're also looking at what are the potential impacts of the actions under those cooling action plans. So what are the potential energy savings, emissions savings, and then looking to consolidate that all together into, into a cooling plan. So that is one of the key initiatives that we have ongoing here in Asia Pacific. And as I mentioned, we are in the final stages of our work with Cambodia on their national cooling action plan, and we're looking to also work with other developing countries in Asia Pacific to develop their own plans. Out of Cambodia, as National Cooling Action Plan, one area of priority that was identified was passive cooling strategies. This was referenced previously, and passive cooling strategies are designed to support green design in buildings in order to introduce low or no energy cooling solutions. It's a design approach to control heat gain, to enable heat dissipation, and to really improve the cooling performance of buildings. This can be through strategies such as highly efficient building envelope design, green roofs, natural ventilation, and high albedo surfaces, and other strategies. But it's very specific to the context and even to the site itself, how passive cooling strategies might be introduced into a building. So as we all know, cooling demand is really being pushed up by increase in income, increased population, increased urbanization, and climate change. And for countries like Cambodia, 45% of electricity demand is coming from cooling, which is a really enormous number, and really demonstrates the importance of cooling and addressing the cooling challenge there, especially when you consider that there's very low penetration of cooling at this point in time. So therefore, it's important to look at, in their cooling action plans, the energy efficient cooling technology, so our active strategies, and there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of entities out there working on energy performance standards across cooling sector. But we can also take that up and look at urban design and planning and how we can address urban heat island effect. But what I want to talk about really briefly with Cambodia is what we're doing with passive cooling strategies for buildings. And here in Cambodia, we are getting set to launch a passive cooling strategies demonstration project. And this is going to be designed to demonstrate the application of passive cooling solutions in a pilot building. So we're going to be looking to identify that building and work with our local teams and with our international experts to assess that building design and provide recommendations on what the cooling strategies could be introduced into that building's design. So we're going to then also be looking not only at that pilot building, but then also the building sector as a whole, and evaluating what are the different typologies that exist within the country, and how might passive cooling be able to be introduced into the various different typologies. And then what are the potential energy and emission savings potentials across the various building typologies. But with our pilot building, we're going to work to integrate the recommended solutions and then assess and evaluate what are the actual energy and passive energy and emission savings from the passive cooling strategies that are in that building. And then that's going to help us inform our assessments on the broader potentials at the national level for passive cooling to be integrated into building energy regulations, but also to support greenhouse gas emissions and enable, for example, Cambodia's next cycle target for their NDC. As part of this program, we're also going to be delivering awareness raising and capacity building with local building sector stakeholders, including architects, engineers, and real estate developers, to support the large-scale replication of passive cooling going forward in new construction, but also in building renovations. So that's kind of a quick summary of what we're doing in Cambodia. And again, we're looking to bring the cooling action plans to other countries, and also another passive cooling strategies pilot project as part of the implementation of one component of the national cooling strategy for excuse me, other countries. So that's it from me. Thank you so much, Alvin. I really appreciate it, and happy to answer any questions.
Many thanks, Kim. I think this is really exciting, and I think the National Cooling Action Plans is something which have really taken off in many countries, of course, after the first one, which was launched in India. And we will certainly come back to that. But it's and second of all, I think I'm really happy to see that passive cooling has been given some sort of focus. I always like to call it, don't want to call it passive. I want to give it a new framing. Passive sounds a bit passive, So, and maybe that's why it has never really gained traction in the policy making, or at least in the energy policy making, compared to others like energy performance standards and such. So that will be great. And maybe even, SE4All is happy to work with ESCAP to maybe reframe this important technology solution. I call it a bundled technology rather than anything else. Maybe next, to quickly just change the pace of the discussions, and I'll come back to you, Kim, quickly, would be now I would like to move to Herlin. And Herlin, I would like to, of course, take on your experience in Indonesia. Indonesia is a very interesting country now. It has one of the largest Southeast Asia, base for cooling demand expected. Indonesia has set a 2060 net zero target. Indonesia is right now the G20 presidency. They are looking into energy transition sustainability as a key focus. And Indonesia has also done a lot of work on energy performance standards as well. So maybe I would like to focus a bit more around the energy performance standards for cooling appliances, Herlin. And in your experience, what are the key lessons that have been learned by implementing some of these programs, and what gaps are remaining to be filled?
Okay, Alvin, thank you. I'm very happy to share my experiences in Indonesia regarding on energy efficiency in cooling sector, especially in the split AC, because Indonesia already regulate this split AC with labeling regulations since 2015. And there is a lot of gaps here that we found. First is compliance of this regulation, because once regulation published, but then we realized the compliance is not yet there completely. Yeah. And before the compliance, actually, we set the very low minimum energy performance of this split AC. So when it regulate the we found that around more than 700 split AC in the market in Indonesia got 4-star. Yeah, that's but that's also a lesson learned. But from the regulation, then we got better data, and now Indonesia always revise the regulation in every 2 years, and will follow the ASEAN harmonization. That's what happened in Indonesia, and we are developing the compliance application, so everybody can use it more user friendly for the officer that doing the MNP for this regulation. And after the compliance, we also found that public awareness is not yet there. Yeah, even though all the split AC already labeled, but the customer, when they want to decide to buy a new split AC, they will only see the price and the refrigerant. Yeah, only ask about the low watt, not the star level. Yeah, so we need to give more about the public awareness. And then, yeah, the thing is about the capacity building to the stakeholder. Capacity building is not only for the technician that will install the split AC itself, because even though the split AC has 4-star or 5-star, when the technician install it incorrect or with low competencies, then we will not get that energy efficient performance. Yeah, so we need that capacity building for the technician, and also we need the capacity building for sales team from the friends. Yeah, because sales team never told the customers about the energy, high energy efficient performance, how they can get advantage for this high energy performance split AC. So what we are doing now in Indonesia, we would like to make the capacity building also to the sales team, not only technician. And the capacity building should also give to the MNP staffs, yeah, because MNP staffs in the country, the big country like Indonesia, it's not easy. It's we have to spread all the staffs all over Indonesia to get this compliance, yeah. And from these experiences, Indonesia now developing the platform of it is consists of association advice, yeah, government to revise this regulation. Maybe that's my experience in the split unit, yeah, in the appliances. We are now moving to domestic refrigerator, just published last year. Will be mandatory on the next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Herlin. I think these are some very practical points. It's very clear that the story only begins once you issue these standards. It's about compliance. It's about creating the market and the awareness for such appliances as well, and for such standards to be successful. Just a quick announcement for those who have joined us that we would be adding another 15 minutes to this webinar so that we have enough room for discussions. And also, please do feel free to put into the chat your questions. I'll make sure that we can address it with the panel. Now that we have focused a bit around both what Indonesia has been doing in terms of cooling standard appliance, we heard a bit about the role of NCAPs. I'll now turn towards Mehul from World Bank, and basically to give us a bit of an insight, Mehul, that when it comes to NCAPs, India's ICAP is considered as a gold standard, essentially. And there has been a lot of excitement around the ICAP and it has been really taken as an inspiration source. But then now all of us want to understand now, where is the implementation going? And I think that's the biggest challenge to any plan. And for such a big comprehensive plan, how does World Bank think of supporting this and helping India to achieve it?
Thanks, Alvin, and thank you so much for inviting me first up for this very, very pertinent session. And I don't think, given the sort of heat waves that we are seeing across the world, this is probably the most, it's probably the most critical time that we are having this discussion. I was just reading an article which spoke about the uptake of air conditioners going up in the UK and how that will impact climate change, right? So from perspective and the ICAP, right, it is, as you said, a document which is being cited across the board. It's one of the best documents that's been created as a cooling action plan. But when we at the bank got together to try and see where we could really get down and support it, right? So there are 138 odd opportunity areas that the ICAP throws at you where you could really start investing in. So our motivation for the small study that we've done over the past 6 months was to take the ICAP and break it down sectorally and look at what are the key policy, investment, and institutional interventions that are required to make sure that you're able to achieve the goals set by the ICAP, right? So it was a very straightforward objective with which we started. And what we've come out was something, and the second leg of that was, from a multilateral perspective, we were looking at where are the areas that we could really invest in and support the work that the government of India is doing. So we identified 8 priority areas across 4 sectors: that's space cooling, cold chains for both agri and pharma, mobile air conditioning, and refrigerants, where really concessional financing could unlock the market potential, right? So the study is very crucial because it gives a blueprint to other nations that already have national cooling action plans to make their plans more implementable as they move along, right? The second piece is at a point where all countries are struggling with the limited envelope of climate finance. This offers pathways which, if adopted, could make a very emissive sector like cooling become a vehicle for economic growth through the opportunities that it offers in manufacturing and job creation. I think the last piece, which is important, and as most speakers have touched upon, the recent heat waves, that cooling and thermal comfort is not about just the heat. It is about productivity, it's about health, it's about security. So at that point, in a post-COVID world, which is riddled with political uncertainty, it is important that we shed the light on something as important as this, so that governments can take decisive action and make thermal comfort and provision of sustainable cooling a priority, right? So that was the objective. In terms of, I could definitely take you through the 8 areas, but rather than doing that, let me just give you a small example, which will give you a sense of what the scale of the problem is and how we are trying to resolve it, right? So if you look at just the space cooling requirement in India, what this study throws up is that the requirement between now and 2040 is going to be $1 trillion, right? To just provide thermal comfort for all. That number, no bank, no multilateral can finance that number for you. And it has to be a crowdsourced funding that comes in. The private sector has to play a very critical role in it. But that said, that the enabling policy environment needs to be there to attract that funding, right? So as the bank, ideally, if you ask me what would I foresee as the perfect solution for India, if the government of India works with a multilateral like the bank and comes up with a policy package, right, about 8 or 9 policies across the board, looking at how you can really start unlocking this. So India's already done this once, and from an energy efficiency perspective. So if you look at the Ujala scheme that the government of India has, which is the procurement of LED bulbs, where the bank had supported the government of India, what it basically did was bulk procured the LED bulbs. It was able to, over time, over a 3 or 4 year period, essentially crowd out all the incandescent bulbs in the market. And then that became sort of the standard that people procured, right? The same thing if you look at affordable housing, and if you make passive design, and Kimberly spoke about it, and you've also spoken about passive design. If you make passive design an integral part of all affordable housing programs that you have, for instance, India and Pakistan and Bangladesh build over 10 to 15 million houses a year. If you make that a standard, then automatically the private sector. Similarly, if you were to make super efficient fans a technology option, a standard in those houses, then you would automatically see the market respond to that. So I think that's sort of the ideas that the bank is projecting at the moment.
Many thanks, Mehul. I think that's a very, very good insights. And in fact, I would just like to put in a bit of an information to everybody listening to us as well, that we at SC4All kind of really realized the importance of now bringing financing more closely into the discussions of energy efficiency, and not only energy efficiency, I think more specifically in terms of the sphere of cooling as well. So certainly we have been working with a lot of our partners, and last month we had a meeting with the partners on an energy efficiency charrettes. And we are trying to now work with the various partners and set up a market readiness facility. And bulk procurement model is certainly something that we are really encouraging for deployment of off-grid solutions, affordable cooling solutions. That's certainly one of the models that can be certainly that we can try and emulate the success of the Ujala scheme, certainly. One thing that I could really take out, and I would just now bring back to Kim, is Kim, you could hear from Mehul that he is talking of not only NCAPs, but bankable NCAPs. And this is maybe, I want to throw this question around to you, is that how do you think SCAP can now work with all the developing countries, or whichever country is interested in this, to help them to make bankable NCAPs? One of the things that I have at least seen is that NCAPs are going through different iterations. And how can we avoid that, so that we don't have enough time to make different versions of the same plans. So how can we better work towards that?
Thanks, Alvin. I think you touched on something that we've definitely found with NCAPs, and that yes, there are iterations that happen because data is so scarce, and so collecting that data for any aspect of the cooling sector is a major effort. And so I would say that our approach has been to start with the key priority sectors and then expand out. But to make bankable projects, data is really key. Understanding what needs to be invested, what are the impacts of those investments, the returns on those investments. So if we're looking at passive cooling design in Cambodia, for example, we're really going to be looking at what are the different technologies that are available that are suitable for that climate? How much do they cost? And what is the return on investment when we start to, as an individual technology or as a combination? And so we're really going to be digging into that in our Cambodia project.
Thanks a lot, Kim. Yeah, I think that's very good to hear, because I think the implementation of these plans are something which is, major entities like the bank, ADB, when they come in, they really play a big role. And I think we have to make the field as ready as possible for them to come in, and so that they can start with their role. Yes, Kim, please.
One thing I would like to add to that, that is a key challenge for when we talk about passive cooling, is the disconnect between the entity, the builder, and the energy consumer ultimately. So it's going to really come down to regulation and enforcement of those regulations to make those technologies mandated in buildings in order to build those markets.
Perfect. And I think this is, as a moderator, my job is becoming very easier. I'm kind of segueing into one thing to the other. Now, circling back to regulations and enforcement, Herlin, I'll come back to you. We heard a bit about the case that you did around split ACs, the energy performance standards, implementation, and some of the lessons that you've learned. One of the key, global, the policy for sustainable cooling that has been really going on is the multilateral agreement on Montreal Protocol. Now, the Kigali Amendment is kicking in. There is a overall drive to move towards, low GWP and technologies, refrigerant technologies. Could you share a bit how you are working, or at least what is Indonesia's plan to kind of get the energy efficiency and refrigerant transition go together?
Yeah, thank you, Alvin. Of course, actually, it is just we are all know that a country needs a national cooling action plan. Yes, to have more to have better planning for these policies. On this regarding the cooling, the Kigali Amendment, Indonesia, of course, will ratify this Kigali Amendment, and we will follow by reducing the HFC, following the international commitment. Indonesia will just follow the schedule of. I heard from the Ministry of the National Ozone Unit that Indonesia will follow the schedule, and it is not enough it is not enough only following the using of the low GWP refrigerant. We should also follow by energy efficient and also using rooftop. In Indonesia, we are started using rooftop PV. Yeah, so we mix this regulation with the PV solar connected to the cooling appliances. That's what already initiated by Indonesian government. I think it's a good move, good initiative from Indonesian side. Yeah.
Thanks, Erling. And I think, yeah. Do you have anything else to add? No, okay. Yeah, I think that's certainly important because the Montreal Protocol has given a lot of the at least the climate action leadership for the for cooling sector, and I think it is very important to keep that centered and focused around, and kind of really leverage some of the opportunities that is being presented with these phase out plans or the phase down for HFCs that is going to happen. Maybe now, Mehul, I'll just try to go towards you, and I picked up a very interesting point of Herlin, is this move away from baseload, or at least fossil fuel baseload, and kind of moving towards sector coupling, or let's say renewable energy powered cooling solutions in the off grids. There's a lot of new technologies that are really coming in. And of course, if you talk to the private sector, they will say, "Oh, the technologies are there, we don't have the finance." So what really is required from what I'm seeing is that, so there's a Montreal Protocol, there's a multilateral fund which is there, which is funding very specific set of cooling projects. So there are these scattered approaches to the cooling sector and financing. What do you think that World Bank, from World Bank perspective, how we can bring all of this together and make it a bigger ticket size?
Thanks, Alvin. So I'll break this down into three pieces, right? One is from the perspective of the study that we've done, and from the perspective of India specifically. I know that's not Pan-Asia, and the context will be very different. But from the context of India, one of the crazy ideas I would call pushing for is that the government of India should think of a cooling mission, right? Where, because cooling is a multi-sectoral challenge, the issue that you start observing is that the Ministry of Environment developed the plan, but the implementation has to happen at the Urban Development Ministry. It has to then go down into the second tier, right, where into the third tier of governance in India, which is at the city level or at the urban local body level. Then you have the Ministry of Road Transport and Agriculture and whatnot, right? So if you had a cooling mission in India, each ministry would have a target, and most importantly, even if it's a small dedicated fund that the government allocates to that mission, it showcases the government's intent, and then you can crowdsource it with a lot of other funds. You can get multilateral to come in, and you're trying to achieve the results. Things very similar to what you've done on Swachh Bharat, for instance, or the Jal Jeevan mission, which is ongoing. So that would be an ideal setup at a country level for me. The second thing is you spoke about these funds. So at the bank, we also have the cooling facility, the SMAP cooling facility. Now, how we've used, and it's very interesting that, before the meeting, you and I were talking about whether you can talk to me about the cooling facility or not. I didn't know much about it, but, when I drilled down into it and I read about it, it's essentially what, I look at it as technical assistance. And had you asked me what is the technical assistance that the bank is doing, I would have known about it. So what we've done with the SMAP fund, which is a $157 million fund, we've gone across the board, right, and looked at providing technical assistance to the clients, and also come up like primers on best practices. So there's a primer on space cooling that has come out. There's a primer on urban heat island effect. So those are accessible to all policymakers if they want to, and more specifically in countries, and a lot of it was deployed during COVID for cold chains, right? So in Mongolia, for instance, for vaccinations, they did not have a cold chain. So the technical assistance on what came through that fund, right? And I would like to throw out one interesting idea that we've been grappling with at the bank right now. The bank recently issued the first of its kind Rhino bond, which is wildlife conservation bond, right? It's an outcome-based financial instrument that channels investments to achieve conservation outcomes. In this case, in Africa, this is about increase rhino populations, right? So just in parallel, one could think about a cooling bond where you again not be based on the maturity of the bond. Instead, it will look at outcomes. So it will be an outcome-based bond, and that could really start helping you leverage more and more financing. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks very much, Mehul. I think certainly seems that 1 hour is certainly not enough, and the added 15 minutes was certainly not enough for us to have more discussions. I would have to unfortunately just pause our discussions over here and hopefully take it to a next platform when we meet. And this is very interesting. And at least from SE4All side, we will try to create more such discussions and have focused dialogues as well. On the issue that you mentioned, Mehul, I think certainly at national levels, it is certainly creating this single missions would be really helpful. The technical assistance to create the playing field and the kind of financing, innovative financing solutions that are needed in the cooling to really deploy. I think what is really clear is that the technologies are really out there. And what really needs to happen is to enable those technologies to be deployed at an affordable manner. With this, I would really like to thank everybody in the panel. This was a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. I have taken some notes down and I'll be getting back to everyone. And with that, I would like to now maybe give the mic back to Georgia. And Georgia, please feel free to let me know if I missed any questions in the chat or anything, or if we have time to address a couple of them. Otherwise, we can take it offline as well. We are more than happy to reply to them specifically on emails as well. Yeah.
Definitely, yes, we will be able to share some of the questions. I think one interesting question, if we have 1 extra minute, is on agricultural value chains. So what are experiences in Asia that could sort of help or inform other approaches in the other developing countries around the world? And other than this, I think it's been a great discussion, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to a next opportunity to sort of carry the conversation forward.
Thanks. So maybe on the agricultural value chains, certainly I think there's a lot of excitement now around off-grid solutions, especially solar PV or solar powered cold chains with thermal energy storage. With the falling renewable prices, it has been really especially solar, it has really come in. I don't know if any one of the panelists would like to come in with any specific experience that they have seen in the cold chains, especially in the off-grid sector. More than happy to take their inputs. Otherwise, we can share more of some of the case studies that we have to our attendees as well.
Yeah, definitely. There are some examples among the data stories at the end of the Chilean Prospects report. And there's a whole chapter on agricultural value chains that also touches upon solutions. So I think there's already some good material there.
Okay, so I think with that, we can then close this session. So Georgia, over to you.
Thanks, Alvin. I think, yeah, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Ishita, as well, for contributing to the conversation. I think it's been very exciting and insightful. I hope it gave some good inspiration also to our attendees. The recording will be available on the platform, on our website. I share the link in the chat. together with the presentation slides. And as Alvin mentioned, we really look forward to carrying this conversation forward. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day and
Thank
evening,
you. Bye-bye.
and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.